Hi and welcome to the second day of our Pride at Work 2021 conference. My name is Christelle and I am from the Dublin Pride team. Before we get started with our first module of the day, Know Your Allies, we have a very special message from Minister Gorman from the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. So thank you, Mr. Gorman, for this message, and let's play that now.
Hello everybody, and thank you to Dublin Pride for the invitation to this wonderful virtual event today. I'm Minister Roderick O'Gorman. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm delighted to speak to you all today as part of this Pride at Work event. First of all, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Jed and his team for organising the event and to acknowledge all the great work that Dublin Pride does for the LGBTI+ community in Ireland. I would also like to acknowledge and thank all the organisations that are contributing to this conference, and I know many of you have a collaborative relationship with my department, and as we continue to work together to improve the lives of people in the LGBTI+ community in Ireland. I'd like to express how important it is now more than ever that events like today's conference continue to take place. I think we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every corner of society, and it's had a particular impact on young people and especially on those who are maybe entering the workforce for the very first time. When I was asked to speak at this event, I was trying to think about Pride at Work and what it means to me. And when I look back on my own experiences in previous jobs and today, I suppose I realise how incredibly lucky I've been to be surrounded by supportive friends and family at home, but also by welcoming colleagues to whom I could be myself openly and comfortably. And I know this isn't the case for everyone, and I think that's what highlights the importance of today's event and organising, championing diversity and inclusion in the workplace. As you know, the government is committed to improving the lives of all LGBTI+ people by making all of society a more welcoming and more inclusive place for the LGBTI+ community, and that includes, obviously, the workplace. The LGBTI+ National Youth Strategy is an action-oriented mission to ensure all LGBTI+ young people are visible, valued and included. The first goal of this strategy seeks to create a safe, supportive and inclusive space for LGBTI+ young people, with one of the objectives specifically referencing that LGBTI+ young people have equal employment opportunities and there is an inclusive work environment for them. To achieve this, relevant government departments, NGOs, trade unions and agencies have committed to firstly providing information and guidelines on equality and anti-discrimination laws, providing advice on ways of making a safe and supportive working environment for LGBTI+ people, particularly for transgendered people, develop guidance information for transgendered young people to support their continued participation in the workplace, particularly during the time of their transitioning, and finally to develop and distribute further education and training information aimed at the LGBTI+ young people who have left school early to ensure they can avail of opportunities that facilitate them reintegrating back into school or further education or indeed into the workplace. As we begin the reporting cycle on this strategy, I will be receiving updates on how these actions are being implemented, and this will be published later on this year. We will shortly be announcing the launch of an LGBTI+ youth leadership programme to build leadership within the LGBTI+ community, and this is a really great opportunity for our community to develop the leaders of tomorrow, and it is open to LGBTI+ young people and young allies from all sectors to take part in this. And these young leaders will do much to continue the strides that have already been made in improving the environment for the LGBTI+ community. In addition, last October I launched the government's Live Out Loud campaign on National Coming Out Day, and this amplifies the stories of those who are influencing, educating and inspiring every sector for LGBTI+ young people by sharing their stories across a number of virtual platforms. As well as the youth strategy, my own department also coordinates the national LGBTI+ strategy. This strategy aims to improve the lives of the LGBTI+ citizens in Ireland through the promotion of inclusion, protection of rights and the improvement of the quality of life and well-being for LGBTI+ people, enabling them to participate fully in Ireland's social, economic, cultural and political life. One action within the strategy provides funding of €700,000 for initiatives that support the strategy's aims, and I'm pleased that this conference today is a recipient of the fund. On top of this, one of the key aims of my department in 2021 is to develop an employer's toolkit for use in both the public and the private sectors to promote workplace inclusion, building on prior good practice such as the Diversity Champions programme. We want to advise employers on ways of providing a safe and supportive working environment for LGBTI plus people. I realise though that no matter how accepting our workplaces are, before coming out, many of us always wonder what will the reaction of our peers be, even if it's just for a moment. That moment of hesitation or questioning whether it'll be okay, whether it is something we shouldn't have to bear. And I hope that society continues in a direction that one day none of us will have to experience a moment like that. I know the challenges facing the LGBTI staff network was discussed yesterday. It may be of interest also for you to hear that my department is currently working on developing a civil and public service-wide LGBTI plus employee and ally network. Colleagues in the Department of Justice has already established an LGBTI plus network within their own department, and that's had great success during the year, raising money for charity and promoting a culture of inclusion within the workplace. Finally, I know COVID can put obstacles in the way of connecting with colleagues, so I hope that both yesterday and throughout today you've had the opportunity to meet new people online and to network. So again, I'd like to finish up by thanking Jed and his team for organising such a fantastic event. I'd also like to thank all the organisations and participants who have contributed to this conference. I wish you the absolute best of luck for today, and I hope maybe this time next year to be able to enjoy a conference like this with you in person. Thanks very much.
Thanks to Minister O'Gorman and also to the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth for supporting this project. And now without further ado, on to our first module of the day, which is Know Your Allies. Joining me this morning are my two Dublin Pride colleagues, Jed and Jamie, and we also invited one of our Dublin Pride volunteers to join us for this chat today. So thank you also to Pradeep Mahadeshwar, who was kind enough to offer to present today. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of everything, it's probably best to start with what an ally actually is. Simply put, an ally is someone who is not a member of a marginalized group, but takes action to support that group. So allyship is basically about having someone's back. It's a continuous and ongoing process of advocating, supporting, and being a voice for people whose voices aren't necessarily being heard. Most importantly, ally is a label that you earn and not give yourself. So how do we practice good allyship? Well, first of all, you have to start by educating yourself. It's not enough to celebrate Pride Month in June or to fly a rainbow flag from your home or your office, or these days your home office, I guess. But being an ally also is hard work. It can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. That means avoiding making others do the emotional and cognitive labor for you and investing time and money in educating yourself about visible and invisible systems of oppression. If people are willing to share with you their experiences, make sure to listen to them with kindness, with humility, and a learning mindset. Be prepared to listen to them and not to speak. It's also about recognizing the plurality and the complexity of experiences. Every narrative is complex, and every narrative is unique, and no group is monolithic. So, for example, a heterosexual middle-class white woman will not share the same experiences as a Black trans woman or a woman with disability. And yes, so next, after educating yourself, a part of this is also a part of educating yourself about existing inequalities is also self-reflection. It's important to acknowledge and own your own privilege and think about it, how this might intentionally or not perhaps perpetuate discrimination. So allyship also means recognizing the advantages, opportunities, resources, and the power that you've automatically been accorded because of arbitrary markers like your race, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your gender, or your mental or physical abilities. By doing so, you can also ensure that marginalized groups are not gaslighted by your attitudes and behaviors. So again, this is not an easy process. It is ongoing. It can be painful, but it's also necessary. While learning about oppression is all well and good, it is more important to actually show your support and to move from passive education and to visible and active allyship. Because allyship is a 24/7 job, just like being a Black queer woman, for example, is a 24/7 job. And I expect you to be an advocate and a supporter every hour of every day. In the workplace, this means bringing diversity to the table, so hiring and also paying members of marginalized communities, from your interns to your assistants to your CEOs. Everyone deserves to make a living wage. It also involves examining your practices and asking yourself if you're building your website, your social media, your policies, your hiring practices are inclusive. Are you making sure that every member of your staff is an ally or has the tools to become one? Are you going beyond box-ticking exercises, blackout Tuesdays, shallow promises, and one-time actions? i.e., is your allyship sustainable and exhaustive? You should also support your co-workers, so be attentive, let them know they can come to you with their issues, listen to their experiences, make sure their voices are being heard, and speak up against discrimination. And then most of this advice can also be applied to allyship outside of the workplace. And some additional advice for allyship beyond the workplace that I would like to give you is to offer your support in the moment. The mantra, see something, say something, also applies to allyship. So yeah, if there is a moment where you experience discrimination, even if it doesn't affect you, you should speak up and try and protect that person. Again, this is not just for your own benefit, but this is also to avoid gaslighting people, and also to make sure and to make clear that discriminatory language and behavior is not accepted. And finally, and you're already off to a good start here, you should visit, organize, and even give workshops if that's something that you're comfortable and qualified to do. Like I mentioned before, allyship is a process, it's lifelong learning, and movements change, just like our pride flag, for example. And we're trying to be more inclusive and add more colors to the rainbow, to include people of color, to make sure that our bisexual, our transgender, our intersex, asexual, and aromantic siblings feel welcome, feel supported, and feel seen. And apart from Dublin Pride, there are already some amazing organizations out there offering educational LGBTQ plus workshops. Just like Shout Out, who will be presenting the next module today. We also have Belong to You Services and TENI, the Transgender Equality Network Ireland. And now that we have a good understanding of what allyship is and how to be a good ally, we'll have a look at allyship in action. We still have a long way to go, but it's important to acknowledge the people who got us to where we are now. So we'll hand over to Jed now, who's going to look at the 40 years of LGBTQ workers' rights in Ireland and what allyship in practice can look like. Thanks, Jed.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sorry, I have to turn my sound on. So, yeah, I'm going to go through the 40 years of LGBT workers' rights campaigning in Ireland. This year is actually the 40th anniversary, so it's appropriate that we're looking at it now. But I think it's very important that when we start looking at these histories, that we don't do it in a congratulatory fashion, that we're not here to all pat each other on the back and say we're a great bunch of lads, aren't we? Look at what we've achieved. Because the reality is that we haven't achieved full equality yet. And the history that we're looking at is very recent. For a lot of people, the progress that has been made over those last 40 years came too late. There's a lot of people living and working in Ireland today whose lives weren't really impacted by the progress that was made. This year, as I said, we mark 40 years of workers' rights campaigning in Ireland. It all started actually down in Cork at a National Gay Conference in 1981, where there was a series of motions put forward to call on the trade union movement to support equal rights for lesbians and gay men. The same year, the Cork the Irish Congress of Trade Union had their annual meeting down in Cork, and it had been decided that the Cork Gay Collective, there was a whole group of gay collectives, there was one in Dublin and Cork, there were various other groups, that the Cork group would take the lead on this area of workers' rights, and they were out shortly after campaigning members at the Congress annual convention. If it's an area that you're interested in, if you go to the Cork LGBT archive, it's corklgbtarchive.com, Orla Egan has a huge amount of work. You'll see pictures of people like Cathal Kerrigan, Laurie Steele, read about people like Kieran Rose, who were instrumental at the start of that movement down in Cork. As we go through it though, there is something that I want you to try and keep at the very front of your mind. It's generally accepted that your 20s are the most defining decade of your life. That's when most people establish the principles and the ideas that they live the rest of their lives by. There was a study in UCD shortly after marriage equality, after the referendum in 2015, and it compared the voting patterns of people who were in their 20s when they voted in the 1992 abortion referendum, and how in their 40s they voted when it came to marriage equality. And it found there was actually very little difference. Ireland had become a more liberal country because of a generational shift. It wasn't because huge numbers of people changed their mind and said, oh, I'm liberal now. So when we go through, and I say a year, think about people who were in their 20s then and what age they are now and how much influence they have in the Irish workplace. So 1982. You'd be in your late 50s, early 60s. The average age of a non-executive director in an Irish company is 61. Non-executive directors are the ones that don't really do much work, but they still seem to control everything. In 1982, Kieran Rose from the Cork Gay Collective proposed a motion that was passed by the Cork branch of the Local Government Public Services Union, and it was calling on the Irish Congress of Trade Unions to pass a motion as well supporting gay rights, both in terms of decriminalisation and in terms of workers' rights. And it got passed. It got passed at a local and a national level, and it made national headlines. It was covered in the newspapers. And this is the first large-scale public act of workplace allyship in Ireland. A huge institution had publicly stated that it was an ally to its LGBT members. It was the very first powerful ally that we had. And a few months later, that new relationship where workers would support LGBT colleagues was going to play a part in one of the most significant moments in LGBT history in Ireland. In 1983, following the release of Declan Flynn's murderers, 569 employees of Air Rianta, which is now the Dublin Airport Authority, signed a letter and delivered it to the Minister for Justice, protesting the suspended sentences. The 569 people were Declan's work colleagues, and that act of allyship also made national news, and it made news just days before the famous march to Fairview Park. On the 19th of March 1983, hundreds of people from students' unions, women's rights groups and trade union members turned up at Liberty Hall and marched beside their LGBT friends and colleagues, and they made history. Throughout the 1980s, the trade union movement continued to build on its support of LGBT workers. In 1987, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions produced the first comprehensive policy document to tackle LGBT discrimination. Unfortunately, the idea that LGBT workers should be treated equally or protected from discrimination was not shared by the Irish government. An attempt to introduce some legal protection for LGBT workers in a proposed equal status bill in 1990 was voted down by the government. So if you were in your 20s in 1990, that puts you in your 50s now. The average age of an executive director, that's the boss, is 52. 26% of Ireland's workforce are over 50. As late as 1993, a Labour court case between Donna McAnellen, a lifeguard and fitness instructor, and her employer, Brookfield Leisure Centre in Cork, found that while she had been treated in an unfair and arbitrary manner, they fired her because they saw her kiss her girlfriend, she was not entitled to any protection under Ireland's equality laws. The big problem, of course, was that homosexuality was illegal. And a clear message from the state was that LGBT people were criminals and they should be treated as such. Being out at work wasn't an option for most people. And in a small country where everybody knows your name, being out at all could put your career at risk. It wasn't until 1993, when homosexuality was finally decriminalised, that any chance of equality for LGBT workers under the law was possible. Of course, just because it was possible didn't mean it would happen. The 1993 Unfair Dismissals Act was updated at that point so that there was protection against dismissal, but there was still no protection against workplace discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. It wasn't until 1998 that the Employment Equality Act would include sexual orientation as a category where people would have protection. And even then, this was still Catholic Ireland. So a conscience clause was included, the famous Section 37. It didn't apply to religious-run institutions. But that's almost every school in Ireland. It's hospitals, it's care homes, it's a whole range of activities. A whole sector of Irish society still did not have equal employment rights. We went through marriage equality and gender recognition in 2015, and they still didn't have equality in the workplace. It wasn't until December of 2015 that things changed. So, if you were in your 20s in 2015, how old are you now? Well, maybe still in your 20s. The vast majority of workers in Ireland started their careers at a time when discrimination against LGBT people was still acceptable under the law. During Pride Month in 2019, the Oireachtas Library published a review of LGBT life in Ireland in statistics. This is the section on employment. It tells us that a third of us don't feel safe or comfortable being fully out at work. 17% have experienced bullying. We have an employment gap. We're 7% less likely to have a job. We have a salary gap. The pink euro is actually only worth 96 cents. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When I read those statistics, my first thought was, that's pretty good. Considering where we came from, that's actually really good. And of course, that's when I had a panty moment. You know, the one where I check myself and I hate myself and it feels oppressive. It's not so long ago that we had nothing. And it's easy to think, well, we're almost equal and that's good enough. But here's the problem. A whole group of employers and non-LGBT work colleagues are thinking exactly the same thing. You're almost equal. Isn't that good enough for you? The 2019 Eurobarometer survey found that 83% of Irish people support full equal rights for LGBT people. That means 17% don't. And we know that in people my age or older, that figure is actually higher. Some of them are your colleagues. Some of them are your employers. And that's where we come back to the main subject of this session, know your allies. Based on our 40-year history of campaigning for LGBT workers' rights, we don't have the luxury of assuming that anyone is our ally. Unless you've made a grand gesture, lit up your building in rainbow colours, or publicly supported an LGBT charity or cause, how do I know that you're my ally? And this is the issue that we have. Because we can't make that assumption, we need people to make some form of a statement. Allyship, as we've learned a bit earlier, is about action. So what I'm going to do is hand you back over to Chris, and she's going to talk a bit more about how we can show our support for LGBT workers in a visible way.
Thank you, Jed. That was a really nice and really good overview over the last 40 years, and it really shows that there's still a lot to do and still a lot to learn for all of us, and still a lot of room forward. When we think of allyship, we also have to think of who benefits from allyship. So who are the groups that we support, and who are the groups that are maybe still marginalized or where there is still room for improvement. That is why we invited our Dublin Pride volunteer, Pradeep, today to speak to us about his experience, about the immigrant LGBTQ experience, and about how there are specific challenges that people of color that come to Ireland as LGBTQ people face. So I'm going to hand over to Pradeep now, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Chris and Jed, for this amazing opportunity. So I'm Pradeep. I'm from India, and I'm living in Ireland for past 8 years. And I work at Groupon, and Groupon is silver sponsor of Dublin Pride. Also, I work for this section of group of Asian immigrant LGBTQ people who are working and studying in Ireland. So, my take on this allyship is completely different. Whatever this information, which is really important, if information told by Jed is very relevant. But when we think from immigrant perspective, it is completely different story. So what we think that allyship is beyond just pride march, and we need to understand the core issues of the immigrants. If you see the latest data, each year we are increasing a number of immigrants, and within those sections, within those non-Irish national immigrants and non-EU immigrants, there is a huge section who represent LGBTQ plus community. So in this usual life of pre-COVID scenario, what immigrant LGBT person has to go through. So we have these three main issues we face. That the first is um, uh, uh, challenges at immigration process. Most countries still have immigration process which is outdated, complicated, and particularly previously formerly colonized countries, immigration process is still humiliating and stressful. Then when we come here, we found out within the community there is a lack of scope for integration. Racism and biases are still there, and that affect direct to our well-being. And then work and life balance. Ireland is going through housing crisis. When any immigrant people come here for study or work, what the first and foremost problem they face that where they will live safely. And if you are from LGBTQ plus community, it becomes really uh, important to with people who actually accept you, or you will feel safe uh, with them. Now we can look at how things have changed drastically with this COVID scenario. These three challenges have intensified drastically. Immigration process has become more and more complicated, uncertain, and lengthy. Um, most of our social places has closed down, so now everything is restricted, limited towards social media and app. So it has become more challenging to build friendships or building your support system. And work-life balance has affected vastly because most people are living in sharing houses, and 5 or 6 people sharing small space, and everybody is working from home. And when you are from this sexual minority group, it becomes more challenging because there is no privacy, or people might not comfortable with your sexuality. Closure of sexual health services is also intensify this whole stress during COVID for immigrants. Mental health issues there because of uncertainty of work and loneliness. I'm saying so many people past last 8 to 9 months that they have uh, going in going into anxiety and depression. Um, there is another issue that is legal rights. Uh, If they lose their job, what will happen to their work permit? Where do they stand in this legal structure? They afraid to ask questions, and that is very common immigration immigrants point of view. So far, what I have learned myself and with my experiences, and also working with this group, that we need to think this point before become offering allyship of immigrant LGBTQ plus people, and particularly people of color, that migrating to Western countries is the most stressful process. It is not. It is not easy. Most countries still have this manual process, and is full of human errors, and that create physical and mental health issues. You have to prove yourself at every stage that why you are good to immigrant to any Western country. That is that is one issue. Then there is another uh, about homophobia and stigma. They also go through this homophobia and stigma in their own countries, and Ireland has such a good image outside in this country, is that Ireland is progressive, accepting, and open place. But when they come here, what they see is that there is no homophobia anymore. There is no stigma anymore. But there is more larger problem is that is racism. So when you when you offer your allyship, you need to think about this. That like that workplace has LGBTQ plus friendly culture and policies, but we need to think that how we can accommodate and give space to immigrant and particularly uh, people of color. This is another point that I would like to share. These two experiences. There are more than 50 experiences I have. These examples I have worked with this group. This is one example of where this Asian gay person with HIV plus status, and he came to Ireland for work, and because of housing crisis, he had to share house with other people during lockdown period. Working from home, they find out his HIV status, and they were asking him to leave the house. He has Pride initiative in their company, but that Pride initiative discussing these serious issues. So he don't have any support, and he is seeking for legal help. So how this office structure, workplace can support people, and Pride initiatives can look beyond just Pride March. Each LGBT person has the different experiences and different starting point in their life and career. There is one example: this trans person was among the team while that person was on transition period, and uh, their whole team and manager were unaware of the process. HR and employer didn't have priority to make workshop and training happen for the staff and for manager. There was unnecessary uh, tension and confusion among the team and across the organization, and at the end that person has to have the uh, work. So so going through all these experiences, what I have learned so far, that when any LGBTQ plus immigrant come here on work permit, they prefer not to talk about this workplace issues. They just simply avoid these kind of confrontations and question answers because they feel usually insecure. They don't feel that they they don't feel safe, that if they go to their HR or their manager, they they are not sure what kind of help they will be offered, or how it could be helped them. They feel if they put up any confrontation fight, it might lose their job, and it might affect their work permit status. So they just keep quiet. So we need to create the safe space within our workplace that people will feel to talk about this issue. They can freely share their uh, worries, and if they have got any experiences of discrimination, they can freely share and give this opportunity to workplace to work on it. Uh, most people I came across, the people of color especially, they come with this one common statement that my company is more interested in doing Pride promotion instead having fundamental changes at workplace. I'm lucky that I'm working at a company like Groupon, but there are many other companies, and I have these examples when I come across and help people, that there are some companies those have huge Pride presence. They spend a lot of money on Pride, but but there is some discrimination and some homophobia happening within the teams, within the companies. So these companies need to look deeply and honestly into this, how they can create a workplace uh, that will give platform for everyone that will come to work with their true self. Another thing, lesbians, bisexuals, non-binary, trans sexual people, they don't get enough visibility, or they don't feel considered as part of LGBTQ plus group. It is all about, in most cases, it's all about cis gay man. So LGBTQ plus or queer is not about only man. There are other fragments of this um, uh, community. So we need to understand that an LGBTQ plus, it stands for reason. Alphabet stand for certain reason. So what can we do better. We don't want any rocket science here. These are problems that we can solve with the communication, and allyship has the power. If we look into it seriously, it has power to change things in a positive way. We need to create the work culture that will encourage people to come and discuss issues. Uh, when you are immigrant, your workplace become your most priority, and that's a place where you can create relationships like friendship and support. And we need to have this implicit bias training should be mandatory at our workplace. And it will be also amazing to see some sexual minorities at leadership positions. That's a valuable example. And LGBTQ plus friendly policies need to be understand immigrant issues, and they can accommodate those issues as well within this LGBTQ plus initiatives. And last one is my most favorite, that Pride happens only once a year, but LGBTQ plus people have to live with this issue each day. So Pride is important. I'm not denying it. Pride is important, but we need to look into it as like how we can create each day is Pride, each day for inclusion, and each day there is space for diversity at our workplace. And at the end, thank you, Dublin Pride, for giving visibility for the immigrant LGBTQ plus community. So Jed, thank you so much. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep, for this very good presentation. I think it tied in also very well with what Jed was saying about not patting ourselves on the shoulders too early, not settling with what we have achieved so far, but always trying to do more, to be more, and to be truly equal, because we're not there yet. And I think that's something that we want to get across. Also, what we want to get across, and I think that Pradeep did a very good job with that, is that we need to look at who we are supporting, and we need to make sure that our activism, our allyship is intersectional. And that is also why we at Pride at Work and we at Dublin Pride are doing our best to do so, and are introducing our Pride at Work, our Pride Partnership Programme for 2021 and 2022. And I'll hand over to Jamie now, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much, Chris, Jed and Pradeep. Tough acts to follow, but I'll give it my best. So we've learned 3 main steps to being a true ally. Oh, just have to go back there. So the first is education. So if you're going to help anyone, you need to understand why they need help and why they deserve it. And of course, you need to know how you can help. We need to see action, because it's not enough to talk about being an ally. You need to actually do something. And visibility, because we don't have the luxury of assuming anyone is our ally. You have to tell us, and you have to tell others, because that's how allyship works. Dublin Pride, like many other LGBT organisations, are here to help you to be a true ally. And of course, the first step is education. As part of our Pride at Work programme, we have a range of workplace training sessions that can be delivered online, or, when the time is right, hopefully soon, in person. The first one we offer is the ABC of LGBTQ+ and understanding pronouns. This session can help you get to grips with LGBTQ terminology, because understanding terminology and pronouns can feel a bit daunting, I know, for people at first. And terms can change and evolve every now and then, but it doesn't actually have to be a taboo conversation. From understanding the differences between sexual orientation, gender identity, and biological sex to getting a hold on pronouns, we've got you covered. We're happy to provide a safe environment where people can ask questions, learn about things, and share their outlook and experiences, making your place of work more inclusive and supportive for all who work there. The second one, which goes back to, I suppose, what Jed was speaking about earlier, is the journey of Pride, the history of the movement in Ireland and abroad of what Pride around the world is doing now. If you want to know your marches from your riots, your protests from your parades, because from the Stonewall Inn of New York City to Fairview Park in Dublin, global and local events help shape the journey of LGBTQ people and their communities. With hard-fought victories in Ireland in terms of marriage equality, blood donation and gender recognition, what are the most pressing priorities for LGBTQ organisations now? And with over 70 countries where it's still a crime to be gay, how can we support groups and organisations trying to operate in those hostile countries? And what can everyone do to make a difference? We hope that this informative session will help shine a light on all the work past and present and how much there is still to do. The second one, which I suppose comes to this overall module, the third one, which comes to this overall module, is how to be an ally. Because being an LGBTQ plus ally, I think like Pradeep says, can't be just about one day a year. It can make a huge difference for all those in the workplace, as well as in everyday life. Whether you show your allyship by coming to pride parades or just standing up against homophobia or transphobia, it's super easy. But sometimes we worry about using our voices in case we offend or say the wrong thing. Join us as we go through talking about the power of allies, confronting our own bias and identifying hurtful or damaging language. This informal workshop will aim to show people how they can make a huge difference through everyday acts of kindness. And last but not least, a bit of fun, a pride quiz. The idea behind this is to have a bit of fun while learning, whether it's trying to work out the year of the Stonewall riots or how many times there's been an LGBTQ plus world leader. Let us host a quiz for you and your team. Topics can be anything from history to politics to sports to the Eurovision Song Contest. It's both fun and informative and with prizes galore. We also offer bespoke training, so if you have something that you want particularly tailored, of course, we're happy to facilitate that too. For more information on that and to find out how your company become a Dublin Pride partner, visit our booth in our virtual community centre or contact Pride at Work at dublinpride.ie. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it back to Chris.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you also to Pradeep again and to Jed for their presentations. Thank you also to you for watching, for your comments. We've received some very good feedback on our presentations, and we see that intersectionality to you is just as important to us, to you as it is to us. So thank you very much, and keep them coming throughout their day. Thank you. So our next module for the day will be at 12 p.m. with the good people at Shout Out, Bella and Afric. And so we'll be just 30 minutes, we'll do a little break, and then we'll be back at 12. Thank you so much. Bye.